The Aaron and Derrick show, or the Derrick and Aaron show, or the show, just the show.
Back up.
And I'm Derrick Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson.
And it's good to see you, Aaron. It's been a week. It's been a long week, but
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you, man.
Likewise. Yeah, been a good week, but it's good to be here.
Yep, it has been a good week. I can actually concur with that.
That's good.
And I love it. I love it when I have a good week and you have a good week, and we
Yeah.
can share our good week with everybody. And
Yeah.
that being said, what do you have in the glass, man?
I'm just drinking some good old fashioned whiskey and Coke.
Okay.
Seagram 7, cheap blended whiskey.
Yeah, that's okay, man. Seagram 7 was my grandmother's drink. It's so funny because she was a big church goer, but she loved her Seagram 7 and Coke. So for me, it's just Merlot. It's
Right. Yeah.
going easy. Got to get up early in the morning. Me and May are taking one of our adventures tomorrow.
Nice.
So we got to leave for the airport, I think, at 3.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay.
But well worth it. Well
Yeah,
worth it.
it'll
Yeah.
be fun.
Yeah. So anyway, tonight got a great topic, and we went through the archives. We turned on the Wayback Machine and looked at what we talked about in the past, and we've not talked about this. So this is going to be uncharted territory.
Mhm.
But I think that it bears mentioning because it's something that comes up constantly in both spiritual and secular um, thought paradigms.
Yep.
And today we're going to talk about existentialism and spirituality. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but I love these isms, these philosophies, and like humanism and stoicism, and I'm just really kind of getting into all of this, and as I read this stuff, I'm like, where the fuck have I been all my life? Because some of this stuff is really interesting, is really compelling,
Yeah.
but there's a dark side to it. There's a dark side to it, and when you get really uh, immersed in existentialism, you get into this thing called navel gazing,
Mm.
and you're looking inward at yourself at the expense of everything else you could possibly look at.
Yeah.
And what we would like to do, or if we add value to our listeners tonight, I would say that it would present existentialism in such a way that you can compare and contrast this to your spirituality, or if you're a humanist or even a materialist, that you will uh, kind of use the guardrails of existentialism to help guide you along on your journey. At
Mm.
least that's my thought.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
so to kind of set this up, I'm just going to throw out a few working definitions here, because the first thing that we need to talk about is spirituality. What is spirituality? And everybody has a different definition of this, but I got this, and it says spirituality is a broad human experience concerning the search for meaning, purpose, and a sense of connection to something larger than oneself. I, and it encompasses an inward journey to explore one's inner dimensions, as well as the outward expressions of compassion, awe, and a relationship with the sacred or the universe. So I think that's a good working
Covers
definition.
covers all the bases.
Yep. Now, existentialism is the one where not everybody has heard about this, but everybody has heard of an existential crisis.
Mhm.
And we're going to get to that, I promise. But here's the overview of existentialism. It said it's a 20th century philosophical movement asserting that individuals are entirely free and responsible for creating their own meaning and purpose in an inherently meaningless, absurd universe. Rather than following predetermined paths, humans exist first, then define who they are through their daily choices. Now, I want to stop here for a second because um, I don't think that I don't think that existentialism can fully describe or define the human condition, because it says that everything that is not emanating from you is inherently meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that before. Whether you say God, the universe, cosmic consciousness, or whatever,
Right.
there is something greater. And while we can't empirically say that, there is ample evidence that will, lead you to that conclusion. And this is one of those cases where, Aaron, you know how I love empirical evidence.
Yes.
I love what is tangible, measurable, and repeatable.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you talk about spirituality, just like when you're talking about quantum physics, everything isn't tangible, measurable, or repeatable.
Right.
So that being said, I've opened up with what a working definition of spirituality and existentialism, but I want to talk about how they dovetail, and then I'll kick it over to you.
Okay.
And it basically says that existentialism and spirituality intersect by focusing on the human search for meaning, purpose, and authentic living, bridging subjective experiences with objective constraints. While existentialism emphasizes individual freedom and creating meaning in an observed world, it can be integrated with spiritual perspectives that embrace awe, mystery, and connection to something broader.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I think that this right here, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this definition is kind of where you and I both land. That there is a how can I say it, a need for some existential understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, we can never say this to the exclusion of spirituality, and this is where materialism gets it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my opening salvo, man. So,
do me a favor and read that definition again, so I can think through it for a second. Because
okay, yeah. So existentialism and spirituality intersect by focusing on the human search for meaning, purpose, and authentic living, bridging subjective experience with objective constraints. While existentialism emphasizes individual freedom and creating meaning in an observed world, it can be integrated with spiritual perspectives that embrace awe, mystery, and connection to something broader. In other words, the metaphysical or the mystical.
Yeah. Interesting. Gosh, there's so much there. I'm having a hard time thinking of a jumping off point for it. Let's talk about freedom, because freedom is a crucial aspect of existentialism.
Yep.
And some of the existential thinkers that I looked at, I'm by no means an expert on this by any means, talk about sort of this concept of the I versus the them in terms of personal freedom. And it requires what I would call a curious and compassionate exploration of why we do what we do. In other words, are we being controlled by programming that we received from our environment and our experiences, which from this perspective would not be freedom, because it would take away our choice. We're doing what they want,
right,
more than what we want. And this is something that I run into a lot in counseling. And I used to think it was a uniquely Christian disease till I got more out in the secular world. And I'm using disease playfully. It's not a disease. I used to meet a lot of what I would call codependent Christians. And to a large degree, the entire system is built on levels of codependency all the way around. Codependency to God, first of all, codependency to the system itself, and then codependent relationships within that. And what I mean by that is I wrote an article on Facebook where I talked about we outsourced God. And I've really been thinking about this idea of outsourcing, how much of our lives, how much of our opinions, how much of our thoughts, how much of our actions we outsource to other people. And we do that, I think, because of insecurity, right? not really nurtured in our culture in any way, shape, or form to follow our natural inclinations or our intuitions. Most of what we get enculturated into is a inhibition of those things.
Yeah.
You know, it could start in the family with, it could be as simple, Derrick, as, I don't know if you remember, like when kids are little, they got all this energy and all this excitement for life. And it's just, it can get tiring as an adult, right? It's like, calm down, don't get your hopes up,
Yeah.
It could be something as simple as, my kids coming in carrying, and this is a real thing. We used to go to a restaurant that was by a river where we live, and we could sit out and eat. They would have a buffet on Friday nights, and the kids could go play in the river, and invariably they would find snakes. And I remember one particular time they came running into the restaurant, and I'm sure I'm not remembering it accurately. It was probably like 3 or 4 snakes, but it seemed like each kid had like 10 snakes, right?
Yeah.
And they're coming in holding these up in a restaurant where people are eating, right? And they are so excited about what they've found in this relationship that they're building with these snakes, and just think it's the coolest thing in the world. And of course, not everybody in the restaurant was celebrating the fact that you're bringing a multitude of snakes into the restaurant. And so that mismatch of, oh my God, this is so exciting. Look at this amazing accomplishment that we have done. They come running into this restaurant to be met with, fear and chastisement. You can't bring those in here. You need to, dad getting concerned and escorting them out and all of that. And so there's that mismatch, right? And so the point I'm making is there's this inhibitory, is that a word?
Yeah.
This inhibitory reflex in society that goes against our freedoms, right? Because we have to learn how to live with other human beings.
Yep.
But a child, 6, 7 years old doesn't understand the nuances of, what you're doing. Your excitement is terrifying someone. It's completely inappropriate in this context. They don't have the capacity to grasp that. So they experience it. We all experience that as some level of inhibition against our free expression, against our natural inclinations, and against something as simple as excitement, because we typically think of society as there to inhibit what we would generally label as negative drives, right? Like the drive to hurt somebody or the drive to impose yourself, that kind of thing. But there's these inhibitory responses that we get that program us. And so the message they take away is it's not inappropriate to bring wild snakes into a public space like a restaurant. What they interpret is there's something wrong with my excitement. The rest of the world wasn't as excited with what I was doing as what I am excited about, right?
Right.
And then I'm going to get on my usual soapbox about school. We go to school in a school system that's not designed to uncover our brilliance and nurture it and develop it, but in a school system that's designed to create a working class. And so everything becomes inhibitory there because you want a very obedient working class, right? So, and then depending on someone's church experience, my church experience was Methodist. It was pretty benign until later, my adult life, but it was mostly positive as a kid, right? And it wasn't a lot of messaging about legalism or hell or anything like that. But people that have that experience growing up, now the church is doing it, but they're doing it with the endorsement of the creator, right?
Yeah.
And so we learn, we become programmed, we become managed, we learn how to manage ourselves in an acceptable way within the society in which we live. And so from an existential viewpoint, we can end up forfeiting our freedoms, right?
Yeah.
We can translate the message. The message is, the reality is, don't bring snakes into a restaurant where people are eating. There's lots of problems with this.
Yeah.
But the experiential lesson is, there's something wrong with my expression. There's something wrong with my excitement. There's
Right.
something wrong with the way I'm making my way in the world, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the message that we carry, then we end up outsourcing our decisions about how we're going to express ourselves to whoever they or them are in the minds of some of these existential thinkers, right? And so it's this exploration that we've talked about a lot on here, and we keep coming back to. Freedom is a reclamation of our own personal power of expression.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we freely choose how we show up in the world? And I think that might, and I'm just thinking out loud here, so, challenge it for sure, or challenge it in the comments if you're watching. But it almost seems to me that when we're talking about the inward work of spirituality, it's identifying that self that has autonomy, that has rights, that has birthrights, that has the right to express itself and show up the way you uniquely are made in the world. And a lot of that has to do with meaning, right?
Yeah.
So when we were deconstructing, having been pastors and whatever, and I, got my soul living from pastoring, I had to make a choice. How am I going to show up in the world? I'm having these serious, I wouldn't even call them doubts. I would say rethinking things.
No, well, that's your M1A1 existential crisis.
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Yeah. And it's all about meaning, right? And
Yep.
so I have to weigh the consequences of a me versus them kind of environment. They're not going to understand, meaning the Christian community. They're going to react because this is not what we do, versus my own autonomy and freedom to share and decide how I wanted to show up in the world, right? So then you have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze, sort of. And so I think all of that ties into this existential reality that we're talking about.
So this is something I was listening to this podcast about humanism, and that's another ism that I just read. I listen to these things, read these things, and I'm just filled with joy. I'm like giddy as a school kid, But what they were saying is that that humanism speaks to the autonomy of the human mind, but is it really autonomous, or are you informed, impacted, influenced by the system around you, which in turn drives what your thinking is? What like you might say, well, I'm a critical thinker, but my critical thinking is impacted or informed or influenced by everything around me. Right. So the thing is, you wind up being like a dog chasing his tail. Am I really independent? Am I? And here's the thing: like people like us who have deconstructed, and I'm guilty of this. I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm guilty of this. That I've gotten into this point where I said, okay, if you're still in religion, you're obviously not a free thinker. Mm. And when I sit back and sit with that thought for a minute, in the context of what I had heard this week about humanism, I'm like, man, I was way off. Because critical thinking, as it's understood in the classical definition of critical thinking, you can be a critical thinker anywhere. In anything. You could be in a cult and still have some critical faculties. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing is like the search for meaning, and this is the big challenge. I think like where existentialism comes in with spirituality is what I'm thinking driven by me, or is it driven by what's around me? And that's the existential question.
Yeah. I so I've really come to a place, and I've had a hard time articulating, and I haven't really articulated it publicly. So this is this is fresh. I don't even think we've talked about it. So I want to get your thoughts on it. But
Okay.
I just got one of those minds that people could be like any social gathering, and they're talking about current events, sports teams, the vacation that they had, and I'm engaging in the conversation, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about we're living on a giant globe that's racing at thousands of miles per hour through space, and nobody's driving it. What does that mean to me? And when I look up at the star, I'm just always wrestling with
Me too, man.
these things about the nature of reality and stuff like that. And I've come to a conclusion that, to me, as I think about it, as I sit with it, is so self-evident. I'm like, how did I ever miss it? And this relates exactly to what you were saying. And that is that the entire structure of the universe, any dimension that I've looked at or thought about, is not a singularity, but a relationship.
Right.
Everything is in relationship to everything else. And I've had a hard time articulating it because when I have written about it or I've talked about it, as soon as I say relationship, people in our culture, their mind immediately goes to people, their marriage, their coworkers, their enemies, whatever, relationship. And I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it in a much more generic, general sense, right? Like my body is composed, your body is composed of living relationships, right? The cells all have individual jobs to do, right? But those jobs are informed by the relationship to the rest of the body.
Right.
So much so, one of the things I find so fascinating is that our cells have this incredible intelligence and programming that they know what's me and what's not me, to the degree that if I get a organ transplant, I have to take immunosuppressing drugs, because even though it's the same organ, so say I have a kidney replaced with someone else's kidney, even though that's still a kidney, it's from a different tribe, so to speak. It's from a different part of the world, right? It's crossed the border.
Somebody call ICE.
The body has its own ice, right? Like it has its own, oh my God, this is a foreign invader. It's like, no, this is keeping me alive, but my body is so attuned to me that it will attack what's not me, right?
Right.
That's all about relationships. So at every level you look at, whether it's physics, quantum physics, even the psyche, we have different components of our psyche. There's a whole system of therapy now called internal family systems, where the understanding of the human psyche is not one consolidated person, but made up of many different personality types that we have a relationship with. And so thus it has its own family system. And then if I extrapolate that out to my metaphysical beliefs, then I'm really coming to believe more and more in a living universe, like a populated spiritual world. And that informs this thing on autonomy and existentialism, from the sense that I don't think we can know ourselves by ourselves. I don't even think we can be by ourselves.
No.
In other words, so let me give you another example. What I've heard for years, especially being in the therapeutic community, you got to really learn how to love yourself before you can love someone else.
Yep.
But
Correct.
If we look at our life experience, but is it correct? Because if we look at our life experience, I can tell you that the greatest lessons I've learned about how to love myself have come from other people who love me. When I express a part of myself that I think is horrid, which I never do, by the way, and someone sits there and holds space with me and loves me anyway, it kind of teaches me to accept my own humanity and love those parts of myself that I didn't love before. And I couldn't do that in solitary meditative work or just trying to figure out how to love myself. So I would say even my own self-love is informed by the experience of loving relationships where I found acceptance or affirmation, where I took a chance with somebody and thought they're going to reject me for unveiling this part of myself, and they don't even try to counsel me. They just hold space for me there, like, okay, this is no big deal, and then all of a sudden, like, what I made this big deal about myself in my mind, I'm like, oh. So it's this really fine line between outsourcing, right? Because somebody can look at that and say, well, Aaron, you just talked about outsourcing. So it's this interplay that only relationships can have, right?
Yep.
And so I don't think it's an either or category. I think it's an and both category. And so I think the highest level of meaning exploration has to include the relational nature of the universe in which we find ourselves.
Now that's powerful. And as I'm listening to you, I'm having a growing in real time moment, because I've always, especially in recent times, I said the self-love is like the greatest love.
Mm-hmm.
But is it? Because do you really learn to love yourself independent of others, or is you learning to love yourself a product of relationship? In other words, someone helps you to discover your value, and you see that expressed, and you begin to embrace that. And dude, I never really thought of it like that, but that is a really powerful statement, because can you? Because here's the thing: like everything is relational. And what do I mean by that, right? That stars begin as hydrogen fusion reactors, and in the process of fusing hydrogen atoms, they produce helium, and these helium atoms are consumed by the fusion process. And this all helps to create heat. But then, so first of all, the sun or stars don't become stars without a relationship between helium and hydrogen.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And then when we talk about all the matter that we know in the universe, when we talk about elements like chromium and nickel, carbon and iron, that these things are formed as the result of a star dying. So even in death, there are relationships created that are essential to life.
Yeah.
So when I think about this in terms of what you're saying, it's like, can life know life without death?
Mm.
Or can death know what death is without life?
Right.
And again, here we are at one of these existential crises, because which came first? This is the chicken or the egg question. Did life come first, or was life a byproduct of death?
Mm.
And these are things, like, and so when you talk about spirituality, and you dovetail this into spirituality, you say, okay, the spirit has to be eternal because energy is neither created nor destroyed. Okay, so the energy is neither created nor destroyed, but the vessel that the spirit lives in is created and destroyed. Oh man, I'm having a moment where I really need a drink, and I really should have gotten some heavier than wine, now that I think about it, because this has got my brain on fire.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're talking about stars. I was talking about the body, to illustrate the same principle.
Yeah.
But our bodies are made up of stardust, right? Our bodies are made up of stuff that's always been here. And so let's just take the atheist frame, right? Like, one of the arguments, like, that theists use is, how can you look at creation and not presuppose or deny the reality that there was a creator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the answers that I've heard for that is, well, you say God always was. We're just saying whatever the universe has been, it's always been.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets interesting, though. That means that I'm actually made up of all the stuff that's always been here.
Correct.
So whether I look at it from the perspective of God breathed into me the breath of life, and I became a living soul, a son or a daughter of God with eternal significance, even from a strictly materialist viewpoint, I'm still something that's always been here.
Yeah.
And yet it develops this incredible intelligence to recognize what's me and what's not me. And so I think from either way, you can find incredible significance and value as an individual human being, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But this the one thing that I want to kind of piggyback on some things that you've taught is that, you know, consciousness is a really broad construct.
Right.
And so I was listening to this thing. It's called the Master Key System. It's an old book, and I was listening to his audio book. Yeah,
It's been a
and
while.
so basically, they're saying that in the Master Key System is that there's this overarching consciousness, and that we truly don't have an original thought. All we do is we operate within this framework or this field of greater consciousness. So one of the things that you've talked about is you talk about, okay, consciousness, that this is what is the prime mover, right? But so I think about this too, like in quantum physics, they have this thing that they call virtual particles. And so they said even in a complete vacuum, you can observe particles being created and antiparticles that destroy them. And it just happens over and over again. Okay, so let's say let's scale this. Let's scale this. And because in our finite, feeble little peanut brains, these particles exist for like nanoseconds. They appear and they disappear. They're created and they're annihilated. What if you split that hair really fine? You know, millions, billions, trillions of times. Does something exist in those particles, in those virtual particles? And is there a big bang that happens every time a virtual particle is created or destroyed? And then if you scale that out, are we just in the middle of some virtual particle that to us, it seems like billions of years, but for someone else that's above this level of consciousness, it's no more than a fart, you know? And so these are the things that I think about. And every time I do that, here comes the existential crisis, you know? Why are we all here? What the fuck is going on, really? You know, and you have these moments.
Yeah. And I think it is an open question, right? And I think I think one of the things, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to speak for you, and I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, man.
But I think that one of the things that we both pushed back on with religion was it was such a closed system. It was so rigid. They'll talk about mystery. You know, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
We'll say, you know, why does God allow childhood cancer or elite people that I feel like we all owe QAnon an apology for? I don't want to say the word because I agree you could get banned, shadow banned if you say it. Yeah. The e-files, you know. Yep. How, you know, why are these things here? And so they insert mystery. Well, you know, God works in mysterious ways. But in reality, it's a closed system that doesn't allow for the awe and the wonder of mystery. And I think we can become hijacked by that into a loss of meaning where it's like, oh man, I shouldn't have chosen one. I should have chosen
door number 2.
So it's pushing against that rigidity with an openness to mystery. And I think, I don't know, I just keep coming back to tonight this idea of significance. I still think there is a particle I don't know how to say it. Like, I fully reject the physicalist, materialist worldview. I think it's, to me, the more I've thought it through, the more I reject it. Because it just seems weird to me that, like, the universe made of all this dead stuff would create these primates that become self-reflective and have existential crises only to disappear.
Yeah.
That to me just doesn't make any sense. And I just innately, intuitively feel like there is a component, a particle, a thing that makes me me, that's indestructible, that's always been and always will be. And that gives me meaning. And then I have to struggle with all the other issues of meaning within the current context, which right now is Aaron Tomlinson.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I'm not hung up on, like, okay, that, let me say this, because energy is neither created nor destroyed, but it's transformed, right? So we could be something today and be something else tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think that what people kind of get hung up on, and this is where religion kind of loses it, is they get it, if God is immutable, right?
Right.
Therefore, humanity must be immutable. In other words, you were always human, you will always be human. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that you might die, and a star may be born. And your energy is the spark that catalyzes that. And I can't say that empirically,
right?
But or that you die, and a giraffe is born, and you're the spark that causes that to happen. And this is my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that energy is sentient.
Right.
That means that even, like, and I always think about, like, in the Bible, Jesus said, if these don't praise me, these stones will cry out. And people thought that was hyperbole, but that was actually a crash course in quantum physics. That, the energy in these stones would recognize something eternal.
Mm.
And that they would give off some sort of energy. So when I think about existentialism, I think, I get into etymology, and exist is etymologically related to existential.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing is we're talking about something that exists and why it exists. And this is where I think where spirituality comes in, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
And as an atheist, I rejected this, but it's like, because of you, because of Maya, because of Jew, because of Sandy, you guys shook me out of my atheist slumber and said, "Wake up, you spiritual son of a bitch,"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm looking at, okay, existence, mm-hmm. and we're trying to find the meaning of existence, and this is my challenge, or this is where I am right now, and this is where the awe and wonder comes in for me, because do I really need to know what the meaning is? See, I think that we get too hung up, and I know that this was my case, on what is tangible, measurable, and repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
Does everything need to be that? Not necessarily, because when we look at quantum physics, there's this thing called the observer effect, and the observer effect causes, the outcome of observing a particle to change based on who's observing. Mm-hmm. And then this was not Heisenberg. Who was this that said this? That basically you can know the position of a thing, but not the speed of it. Forget which physicist actually said that. but so I want to talk about like people. There are certain people in history that that show up, and if you've spent time in theological circles, one of the people that constantly comes up when you start talking about existentialism is Kierkegaard,
Right.
Soren
Yeah.
Kierkegaard,
Yep.
and he's considered to be an existentialist, and some would consider him to be the father of that discipline.
Hmm.
And but the reason why I say that is there are so many what I call deep theologians, the PhDs and the THD crowd,
Yeah.
that when they are doing an exposition of scripture, expository preaching, that Kierkegaard frequently surfaces.
Right.
And so as I'm looking at this, as I'm doing a survey of existentialism, I'm like, okay, why then does the preacher of the gospel lean into Kierkegaard? Now, to be fair, there are others like Nietzsche and Camus
Right.
that hold esteem to existentialists, but they're not called upon. Like Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is, I always say, like, I used to say this when I first saw this. I said, Jesus, Paul, Moses, and Kierkegaard. Because that's what I saw. If I listen to sermons or scholarly texts being assembled, Kierkegaard always factored into that.
Mm-hmm.
So how then? I mean, because one of the things that I'm hoping to do in this conversation is to dovetail existentialism with spirituality. Not to necessarily marry them,
Right.
But let's juxtapose the two to compare and contrast and say, okay, how do each inform, influence, and impact the other? So that being said, I'm gonna kick it back to you.
You know what? Give me 1 second. The wind's blowing and my door just blew open, and I need to go close it. I will be right back. So
you don't have snow, do you?
No, but I don't need mice in the house either.
Yeah. So anyway, like let me go back to my notes here because so Soren Kierkegaard, he's often called the father of existentialism. He focused on individual subjectivity, dread, and the personal nature of religious faith. And I guess that's where the spiritual types, or where the theological types draw. They're like moths drawn to the light of Kierkegaard, because he cites the personal nature of religious faith. And what's interesting is that before people, when you hear people say you have to have a personal relationship with your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, you guys need to understand that's a fairly modern concept. That's a very 20th century concept, because before it was not a personal relationship with Jesus, but it was a corporate, a communal relationship. And so I think that because Kierkegaard forced this into a religious sausage tube, I guess that's why the religious types love Kierkegaard. Right? So I was going to ask you, like, what is your experience with Kierkegaard, and in terms of spirituality?
Yeah, pretty minimal. I mean, like you, his name would show up. I have a book somewhere on my bookshelf that I read years ago that he wrote. And I think, here's what I think. I kind of think existentialism is a modern problem, a modern way of thinking about the world. I think because if you look back through human history, and this is, I think, very self-evident, spirituality in whatever form defined meaning, defined existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're the shaman in the end, the tribe with shaman in the Andes, and you're communing with the spirit of the mountain and all that stuff, or whether you're a Muslim, right, or whatever. And in the 20th century, such an interesting time because science was very primitive, I would say, in terms of, let's just say, its ethics. I mean, MK Ultra has hit everybody's radar recently, right, in the news, and the ethics of that, but you go back and you look at some of the early science, and it's just like, my God. And so then you have these psychological thinkers like Freud and Jung that come along that really try to divorce the interior human experience from anything religious at all. And so you got the worst of it, which I think is Freud. You're just made up of, you want to fuck and you want to kill somebody. That's it. And we're going to reduce everything down to that. I think Freud had some issues, but keep going. Yeah. Jung, on the other hand, tried to, he was very into Eastern spirituality and mysticism and mandalas and astrology and the Western esoteric tradition. And really fascinating thing about Jung is, he influenced so many time periods because he had this personal work that he was doing called the Red Book, that most people probably never heard of, and it didn't get released until something like 2004 or something like that. And it's almost like Jung coming out from behind the curtain to say, this is what my own interior life was really like. And it was very spiritual. So all that to say, I think that existentialism exists within a context of a culture that lost all spiritual connection with the metaphysical as a access to meaning and an access to explanation of the interior and the interior experience. Now, to bring that back to Kierkegaard, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Kierkegaard.
I think if we look at him in the context of his time, the world had surpassed the forms of Christianity that date back to Catholicism. Like even the Protestant churches inherited a lot of the same DNA. If that makes sense, right? We're, I shared with you, I had an experience recently where I went back into a Methodist church. And I don't mean this offensively. This is I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm just being transparent. For me, Methodism had lost all meaning decades ago, right? And so for me to sit in that service, I'm like, the hell are we doing here? We're just kind of going through motions. Like, what is this?
You were having an existential crisis.
No, I was thinking the Methodist Church should be having an existential crisis more like. But I think that was maybe some of these existential theologians. I think maybe they were looking at these sort of outdated modes of religion that did not communicate or touch on real meaning in the daily practical life of the person. And so, in other words, it's almost like deconstruction in that time period. Like, this is not serving us on the issues of our life that really matter. And so we need to rethink our existence. So that may or may not be accurate because, like I said, I'm not very fluent with his work, but that's my reading of it. Okay.
So Nietzsche, we always hear about Nietzsche, and we typically associate Nietzsche with nihilism, right? But he said that his critique of traditional religion influenced and informed existentialism, and so one of the things about Nietzsche is and this is this is a hard one. I'm going to say something, and some people may take offense or take umbrage at this, and I get it if you do. But I think that Nietzsche postulated the concept of the Uberman or the Superman,
right? Yeah,
and that is what gave rise to Thulism and eventually Nazism. I think that a lot of Nazism was informed by Nietzsche. And maybe that's an unfair assessment. And if it is, let me know. But I think that this nihilism that basically we're all created to die, and
yeah.
and that the purpose of life is absolute individual expression and the absolute expression of everyone like you.
Yep. I think that's a fair assessment of existentialism. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I said I think it's like a more of a modern problem, because we have a dead universe that's just atoms and waves and particles, and then somehow life germinated, and here we are as self-reflective primates that have a very finite period of time. And in the midst of this chaotic, nonsensical world, we have to make sense of our own lives. And so from a psychotherapy perspective, we had to study existential psychotherapy in school. And in some ways, I think it's a better model than today's clinical model, because existential therapists would look at anxiety and depression as the natural response to trying to find meaning in an otherwise meaningless world.
Yeah.
Being a finite being that's going to eventually not be at all, the natural response is to freak out. And so the whole point of the therapy was not, anxiety is not a mental illness, or depression is not a mental illness. It's the natural result of a life without meaning. And then the approach to therapy is how do we, it's totally different. Like today's model is, you're coming to me, I'm the clinician, I'm going to diagnose you based on the DSM, and I'm going to put a label on you, and I'm going to do a treatment plan. The humanist approach is, humanist and existential approach both are, we're both human beings sojourning
right
through this life, and I'm meeting you as an equal who struggles in the same way that you do, and we're going to explore meaning together. That's the framework for existential or humanist psychotherapy, as opposed to what we have today. So I think that's better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, you bring up a really good point, especially with regards to Nietzsche, that okay, we're finite beings, we're going to have to die. There's nothing after. There's no meaning inherently built in, like purpose, destiny, calling, a terminus of all things being summed up in Christ, or whatever we want to say. And so, yeah. But it's interesting to me. Isn't it interesting to you, this arc of individual freedom, when you look at it from a historical perspective, identification with the group was where identity was drawn from for most of human history on some level, right?
Yep.
And then somewhere in there, individual freedom. So in other words, the value was the state. What mattered was the state, and I'm a member of the state, and whatever my standing is in life, whether it's the Eastern caste system or it's the what do they call it? The House of Lords in England. I don't remember what that's.
Divine right of kings.
Yeah. And so I just know my place because I know where I am born into, and it's divinely ordained, and this is the meaning of my life, right?
Yep.
And then somewhere in there, value for the individual began to take hold in the collective consciousness of humanity. And so you have, the John Locke's, and you have the Thomas Jeffersons, and you have
Thomas Paine, and
all that stuff, which I think is important. I think it's important to honor each individual. I think that's extremely important.
Yeah.
And I think we're in kind of this weird time period where, okay, what does that mean? Like, I have to figure out who Aaron is. Like, if I was living in the 1800s even, or, in certain parts of the world today, I wouldn't have to figure out who I am. I know who I am. I'm, whatever, based on who I am in relationship to society.
Right.
But this idea that we have individual freedoms, and I know there's real problems that people don't recognize with, all men created equal, with, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What we think they meant is not what they meant.
Right.
In reality, we've talked about that. But that idea got seeded, right?
Yep.
So whether they meant it to apply to women, or whether they meant it to apply to blacks, or whether they meant it to apply to even white people that didn't have a certain status in their culture, is irrelevant. The idea itself has taken hold in the consciousness of humanity. And so a lot of the social struggles today are around this idea, right? Do Black Lives Matter? That was an issue of
Smoky.
Oh, dude, that was terrible. I said, do Black Lives Matter, and all of a sudden you disappeared on the screen.
No, I didn't disappear. My cat just walked across my
I
screen.
know, but the timing was just like...
Do Black Lives Matter?
Yeah. But do you see what I'm saying? I don't even know. I feel like I've totally derailed the conversation.
No. It's totally on point. And so, one of the things you have to go back is to like the Enlightenment, right? And so, you had Adam Weishaupt and people like him that informed and influenced and impacted George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. But then you also had the Jacobins, from the French Revolution, and all of these people were like, here's the thing, that part of the whole American experiment, the root of the American experiment, was that prior to America, everyone was part of this collective,
right,
that was governed by royalty,
right,
and that was considered to be a divine order, implemented by God himself,
right.
It says this is just the way things are. But what the framers of the Constitution, or the founding fathers, whatever you want to call them, that they looked at this and they said, no, that there is an individualism, and I was reading about Thomas Paine, and how Thomas Paine was a recent immigrant to the colonies. It wasn't like he had been there like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams or anybody. He was a Johnny come lately. But this guy came over, and his ideas were so influential that it reshaped how the American Revolution was prosecuted. And what am I getting to by that is that that Paine is regarded as one of the seminal humanists, leading to modern humanism. But I would dare say that he was also an existentialist. And because if you go back and look at Paine's writings, he was really, really hard on religion. I mean, he just really blasted it. And I'll never forget this. I will never forget this. Back when I was a preacher, some heavy hitting preacher, he had multiple doctorates. He said, I sense the spirit of Thomas Paine in you.
Oh, interesting. That's very interesting.
And so now it's like, okay, I resemble that remark. I'll take that. But the whole thing about existentialism is like, okay, what is the measure of a man?
Mm-hmm.
What is the value of a man? What is the purpose of a man? And I think that when we look at existentialism, I think that one of the things that we need to do, looking at existentialism, is first to pay homage to you, is to take away any materialist aspect of it.
Mm.
That if there is meaning to be found, it's not just in the atoms, molecules, and cells of you,
Yeah.
but it's also the weight and volume of your spirit.
Yeah.
And I think and that's why I think this, taking this and dovetailing existentialism and spirituality is so important, because we're all looking for meaning, but what winds up happening is that in the search for meaning, that we're dismissing awe and wonder.
Right.
And let me say this about that. Like a couple of weeks ago, Maya and I were in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And what is God damn it? Now I can't think of the name of that mountain. Big mountain in Seattle.
Mm.
And now I can't. I had it right in the front of my mind, and I can't think of it.
Geography wasn't my best class.
But check this out. If you see this mountain, there is a natural explanation for it.
Mm.
You could talk about plate tectonic shifts that cause surface crust to merge together and rise up and form a peak, right? Or you could say that it's volcanic, that years of lava eruption has caused this. But then if you look at it just purely scientifically, you miss the fucking awe of this thing. Yeah. Because you look at it and you're like, woo. I'm gonna look this up, because I'm pissed because I can't remember it, and I was just there. Mount Rainier.
I was gonna say that, but I didn't have confidence. You're gonna tell me no, that's in San Francisco or something.
No, Aaron, you got to channel your inner Derrick and just say, "Fuck it, I'm gonna say it," and let somebody correct me afterwards.
Immediately, but then I thought, no, I don't know.
No, you're playing it too safe, man.
I got to see in geography.
You're playing it too safe. Just swing for the fences, dude.
I've lived in Pueblo all my life, and every once in a while I'll drive by something and I'll be like, I have no fucking idea what that is. It could be a like a power plant or something. I'm like, I have no idea. And then I imagine myself having a visitor and like, oh, what's that? I'd look like an idiot. I'm like, I have no clue what that is.
So let me say this, man. I've been in Nepal and I've seen Everest. I've seen it. I've never been up on it. Never even been to base camp, but I've seen it. And it's like, okay, you can come up with the definitive naturalist answer as to why this mountain is there.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that you have to have a sense of awe and wonder. It's like if you go to the redwood forest in California and you look at these trees, you need to have a sense of, I mean, you could say it's a process of phylum and xylem and the roots gather nourishment and the leaves do photosynthesis, and you could come up with all this scientific stuff, but you got to look at this and say, man, that's a fucking awesome tree. And so this is where I think that and I'm gonna say something that's gonna piss off my atheist friends, but this is where atheism misses it, right? Because there is no awe and wonder. It's like, just, okay, this is it. And one of the things that you challenged me on when I was in atheism, you're like, okay, Derrick, okay, I get you. You don't believe that there's a God, blah blah blah. Fine, but don't get trapped in materialism. You used to always, very subtly nudge me away from that. Like, just, dude, don't, like I'm a toddler trying to touch the fire, and I'm grateful for that, because what I've been able to do is I've been able to keep my sense of awe and wonder. And so, tying this into humanity, that we could just say, oh well, we're just the product of a complex biological evolution and chemical changes and environmental changes that have produced humanity. But then when you look at a human being and you think of all the things, first of all, that you were one of billions of sperm that made it to the egg that created you. And then all of the things that have to happen for this egg to attach itself to the womb and to continue to grow, the odds of that are astronomically slim.
Yeah. Let me just jump in, because this keeps coming around. But that was one of the things when I was healing from my heart disease. I kept thinking about, there's so many processes. There's an intelligence that underlies my body. And for whatever reason right now, my heart, my physical organ, is out of touch with headquarters. And by that, I don't mean God, for people to think that I'm leaning in that direction. I mean, like, how many processes are going right in my body right now to keep me alive? Yep. And I've got this one problem that's threatening to kill me. And I was built in the womb according to some design, some intelligence that was manifesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's my issue with materialism. It's reductionistic. And it's reductionistic because of political issues with the church historically. That's historically true.
Yeah.
And science is built on philosophical assumptions. So people can say, I'm just empirical. I just go off, empirical data, and completely deny the philosophical assumptions that promoted empiricism to the place that it holds in our society today. Mm-hmm. That's not being intellectually honest. That's, in fact, either being unaware of the philosophical assumptions, or if you are aware of the philosophical assumptions, you're just being as intellectually dishonest as some Christians are being that you're criticizing.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with observable, measurable, repeatable. It has its place, and its value to humanity has been tremendous, right?
Yep.
My issue has always been, and you mentioned subtly pushing back and stuff. My issue has always been, not everything in life can be reduced down to empiricism.
No.
To something that's observable, measurable, and repeatable.
Well, let me say this. I think that given a sufficiently long timeline, that more things will be understood than they are not understood. But
okay, go ahead, because I'm push back on that. But go ahead.
That while things are not understood, that's just like, before we understood static electricity, this was a parlor trick. And even though we didn't understand it, there was at least entertainment value in it. There was some value in it. And so I think, and I'm not saying that everything is because that would be gross reductionism too, if I said everything is just going to be understood. I don't think that everything is going to be understood, and I don't think that everything can be understood. I think that consciousness is something that we will never quite grasp.
Well, so here's, I want to explore how you categorize this, because I'm hearing two different things.
Okay.
If we say, given a sufficient amount of time, everything will be understood.
Well, I say more things will be understood than.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Because I'm not going to say everything.
Because every answer leads to more questions, right? Yeah. It's like an infinite search. So yeah, you're right to correct me on that. But here's what I'm wondering. Like, understood is a different category to me than like static electricity, which is measurable and explainable in physical terms.
No, excuse me. I was talking to me.
It's fine. No, but I was asking you a question, so I was going to give you time to do that.
What was the question again?
Well, I'm wondering how you're categorizing the thinking, because understood to me is not the same as like static electricity, which is measurable
Yeah.
and understandable by the laws of physics.
Yeah.
So I can agree that we'll be able to understand everything. What I'm saying is I don't think everything that can be understood fits into a framework of the law of physics.
And that may be true. There may be a requirement for another scientific discipline to emerge to produce that understanding, because again, we would not have an understanding of atomic energy. We would not have an understanding of electromechanics, without quantum physics. And quantum physics was a discipline that emerged to produce an understanding of.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there will be some scientific discipline that begins to address like thought.
Or maybe science, it just has its limits, right?
Oh, science.
Maybe there are other ways of knowing. So, for example, like you and I have a lot of affection for each other, right?
Yep.
So that's an element of reality that I experience as very real toward you, and I experience is very real coming from you, that I don't think has physical properties at all. Right. So now, I don't think it can be.
There are people that would reduce that to the chemical.
I think that there may be effects that can be measured that are physical, but I don't think the affection that I feel has any physical properties whatsoever.
Okay, so let's say that the result. Okay, so let's say that the genesis of it. Let's say that this is a combination of this hormone, this chemical, and that, right? And you say this is going to produce a result, but you produce a result that's greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, I would say the hormonal exchange is the effect, but not the cause.
Right, and I would agree with you.
Initiated that came from me, that was not initiated by something else.
Right.
So we're measuring the effect, but the actual cause, I don't think is material.
And I can agree with that, because it would, and this is my word for the day, is gross reductionism. That it would be grossly reductionist to say that this is just a biological process.
Yeah.
And some, there is something greater, because okay, or say like here's another thing. I use this as an example, right? Music. I like Kenny G, right? I like Kenny G because of his technical prowess.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
If you listen to Kenny G with really good audio equipment, really good headphones, or really good speakers, you can actually hear the valves opening and closing on his instrument. That's how precise he is. Now, does Kenny G give you an emotional response? Now, for me, he doesn't. I'm more in awe of his technical ability.
Yeah.
But I used to listen to David Sanborn.
Yeah.
And David Sanborn was nowhere. He was nowhere in the same universe as Kenny G in terms of the technical aspect of it. But there was something about the way David Sanborn played. In his imperfection, there was something emotional. And you couldn't tie it to the opening and the closing of the valves. You couldn't tie it to his finger movement. You couldn't tie it to his breath work. There was just something. And so when to your point, when I'm thinking about like how you and I feel toward each other, we have a brotherly love. We have a love that transcends the fact that we're just friends that connected over Facebook.
Right.
There is something that when I think about you, I get an emotional.
Yeah.
I get a wave.
Right.
And so what is that? And again, it would be gross reductionism to say that, okay, well, that's just a chemical response that you get from the sound of Aaron's voice. No, That's not. It's more to it than
I wish it was that. I'd be seducing the world.
that. Bengali
No,
or Cosmo.
I just think if we keep it in its right category, science and empiricism and all this stuff is beautiful. I just don't think it provides a total explanation for reality any more than I think the Bible provides a total explanation for
Right.
reality. And so
And to that point,
I think when it comes to existentialism and meaning, we're dealing with stuff that's beyond the scope of the physical world.
well, and to that point, this is what I'd say. And this is my closing argument.
Yeah.
Why try to? Why are we so obsessed with finding meaning
Mm.
instead of just observing the greatness, observing the glory,
Yeah.
right? And I think that when we focus, I was thinking about there's a scene from Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's
Yeah.
last real movie.
Yeah.
He said, look at the moon, and he said, do you focus? And his student was looking at the finger. He said, no. He said, you're focusing on the finger and you're missing all the heavenly glory. In other words, we're focused on the pointer.
100%.
We're focused on the pointer because the pointer is what tells us
100%.
what the thing is. It defines the thing. But if we say, okay, I'm going to take away the finger and just observe the thing, and then let me absorb, let me bathe, let me saturate myself in the glory of what I observe, and whatever that is.
Right.
And I think that this is where we elevate spirituality. Well, I won't even say elevated, because you're elevating both spirituality and existentialism, because you're looking at your existence, who you are, where you are, that your identity and your locus, right? And and spirituality that says that, okay, there is something bigger than me. There's something smarter than me. There's something afoot that I can't put my finger on it, but it makes me feel good, or it makes me feel bad,
Yep.
and I think that that's what where, I think that that's where we kind of miss both existentialism and spiritualism. And I think that the thing that I was learning from this, and this is why I picked this topic, is that I think that there's something that we have to learn from both. And yes, it's good to question why you are here, but don't dwell on it to the point that you miss all of the glory about you.
Yeah. I think, and this is one of the things I was thinking earlier in the conversation. So you were saying that, even though you weren't saying that, because as I was listening to you, I was getting the summation in my own mind. So you were communicating the principles, even though you summed it up,
Yeah,
brilliantly there. And I think the modern problem is we're stuck in I want to say aboutisms, but that's not quite the right word. That doesn't communicate what I mean. We think about life. We think
aboutisms or whataboutisms.
Yeah, that's why I said it's not the right word. In other words, we abstract life into thoughts.
Yeah.
We abstract truth into something to be studied and comprehended.
Right.
Whereas I'm thinking life is more about participating, right?
Good point.
And that's what I heard you just sort of brilliantly sum up. Like, we can get so stuck in an existential crisis because we're thinking about what is the meaning of my life. We're thinking about
or what is the meaning of this, whatever this is.
Yeah. Rather than just engaging with it and participating with it and allowing our experience to be our experience and allowing that to be our epistemology. our
Mm.
understanding of what life is based
Yeah.
on how I've experienced it,
Yeah.
and keep engaging and keep showing up and keep participating even when life gets hard, rather than retreating into our mind where we just want to problem solve, but we do it in this really abstract sort of way.
Yeah, and problem solving has its place where,
Of course,
where you're rationally dissecting things,
of course.
and but there are some things where um, I think about this as Edwin Hubble, the great astronomer. He was dedicated to finding um, and locating new worlds and new world systems in the heavens. But what he never lost was his childlike awe for everything that he saw in the sky. And I think that's what made Hubble unique.
Let, let me close with this. One of the differences that I've noticed in my interactions with the Black community, in specifically the Black religious community, all right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've noticed, one of the things that I loved about preaching in a Black church, the experience was so much more participatory.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I remember going to a Black funeral for the first time, and God,
Lord Jesus!
No.
Oh.
I'm going to tell you, this is powerful. This young man had passed away. His mom and brother went to our church, and I was asked to officiate the service.
Yeah.
And it was an open coffin, and this woman, I don't even know who she was to this person, but she comes running down and she just grabs his body and she's just wailing.
Mm.
And I thought, we don't do that.
No. Because I can tell you the first time I went to a white funeral and I was like, whoo, this is somber.
What we do is we're all about the aboutism.
Yeah.
This is what their life was about. This is a tribute. This is a memorial. This is the video that we're showing on the screen of the different photos that we kept. And this is the obituary about their life. And this is the eulogy about their life. But there isn't that raw emotion that we all feel when someone dies. And it feels like a part of us died too. And that's the difference to me. I mean, that just illustrates the difference, right, between participatory life.
Yeah.
Like what she was doing, I was like, that's what we all feel. That's what we all want to do when someone we love has passed away.
Yeah.
And that's just raw, human, real energy on display. And we're stuck up here in our, aboutisms.
Well, if I could piggyback on what you're saying, it's like we need to stop looking at what is the result, and really say, okay, how do I participate in this? And I think that what life is all about really is participation. That we are here not to study, not to evaluate, not to make sense of, but to participate in it. And go ahead.
No, sorry, dude, my mind is just like spinning. But like one of the things, I think it helps me understand, like, I got in trouble for this. I made this statement about, I was talking about differences between white people and Black people, and talking about how Black music just stirs something in me. But I think there's an embodiment of the music that comes through a lot of Black music, whereas white people are just playing notes on a scale. You know what I mean? Like, it's all happening up here. Like, I'm reading the music and I'm thinking about it, versus like this embodied. Yeah. And it has a different quality. It has a different vibration.
Let me say this: that there, and I'm not going to say like all Black artists are immersive like that, but it's like there are white artists that when you listen to what they're doing, it takes you somewhere. And like I'm a big Steely Dan fan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you listen to Steely Dan takes you somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, without question. I'm
And
speaking mostly in the church context.
well, yeah, in the church context, but like, and again, like there are people in the church community, like you can love or hate Toby Mac, but Toby Mac has a way of painting mental pictures
Yeah,
with his music.
sure.
And and it's not like it's not white church music. It's
Right.
it's so I get what you're saying. That and again, I think that the whole call to action in this episode is how do you participate? How do you get involved? How do you set aside your whatever your preconceived notions are, your confirmation biases? you know like you can take a dive in the water and you can say, well, this is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen.
Exactly.
It's here in the mountains, so it's in fact impacted by the zinc and the iron in the water. And you can go through all of that, or you can just say, this jump in the water is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I think that we need more of that. We need more of that. Just jump in the water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so. I think that's how we grow. I think we grow more by participating than just, again, thinking has its place. This isn't an all or nothing zero-sum game.
It isn't.
But I think we do too much thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And you know how hard it is for me to say that, because you know me pretty well. But when you say, yeah, it's too much thinking, yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. But you're participatory.
I am, but I'm also I think to a fault.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better.
I think that's the modern disease, frankly.
Yeah. I'm getting better.
I'll let you bring us out. So
all right. Well, listen, folks, I hope that this conversation helped you, for all of you that are listening live and all of you that listen in replay. Just take the time to really consider, and I always say this, consider your belief system and say, okay, am I believing this because somebody told me this? I'm being impacted, informed, and influenced by someone else's thoughts on this, or am I excuse me, an active participant in this? And I think that that's what we need, that we need to be more participatory and less, but whatever, thoughtatory. I don't know.
Auditory. I like that.
I'm making up words now.
I like it.
So that being said, from us to y'all, I hope y'all have a great weekend. And as we say, peace and air grease.